Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Rob Edwards, and today I am talking Game of Thrones Episode 3 with some predictions for Episode 4. And if you watched my review show from last week, you will know that my predictions for Game of Thrones tend to be 100% on the money if the money was going somewhere else than was actually seen on the show. Because I didn't get a single thing right. Basically, my predictions last week were so far off the mark, and the closest I got to being right was suggesting that maybe something in the crypt might get raised, but I didn't think it was going to be everything because clearly the Night King's power had to be constrained in some way. Well, that's not what happened. But it was about the closest I got to what happened. But it's not that really upset me about this. I wasn't a fan of this episode. And it wasn't that my predictions were wrong. I'm quite happy. If the show wants to go a different way and present me with something really cool and interesting and out there, that would be fantastic. But I didn't get that from this episode. What we got from this episode was really spectacular. Don't get me wrong, I thought the achievement of getting all that on the screen, I mean, it was all quite dark, so I'm assuming it was all on the screen. Getting it on the screen and doing this battle and those sort of great cinematic tracking shots and lots of really neat things that sort of directorially in this episode were really impressive. And it was hugely tense. I was on the edge of the sofa the entire episode, wondering what was going to happen next, how it was all going to pan out, were the heroes going to win. All of that stuff was very, very exciting. But it wasn't a very good episode of Game of Thrones. It was a great TV episode, and if it was a TV episode of something else, I would have really enjoyed it. But as it is, I was really quite upset by it. And partly it is that, obviously, as I say, with Game of Thrones, I expect to see personal stories being played out. And we got very little of that this time. We got a lot of action and a lot of there was a lot of death, and so that is, something quite personal happening to those people. But the only real character stuff we got, probably the bits which stood out in the episode, really, you've got Sansa and Tyrion in the crypt, you've got Melisandre and Arya and the Hound all having their little kind of tete-a-tete over Beric's corpse. You had maybe, I suppose, the Bran versus the Night King bit at the end. But essentially, that was about it. Instead, we've had 8 years building to this episode, 8 years of being told over and over again, this is the real threat. The real threat is the army of the dead, and all this politicking is nonsense. You've really got to buckle down and fight this threat. All of Jon's story was leading to this point. I mean, there was the whole Targaryen thing as well, but basically 90% of Jon's story is leading to this point. You have all of Bran's story. What is the point of Bran if all we get is this? And I just didn't like it. As payoff for all the stuff that we've had building to this point, it was really not good. If I wasn't going to get my prediction for this episode, and there's no reason why they would do my story, they didn't know what I'd suggested. But if they were going to go their own way, then I would like to have seen this battle result in our heroes realising there was no way they could win and having to retreat, and maybe having to retreat to the Iron Islands or to Dragonstone or some secondary point where the fight against the Night King could be restaged, we could learn something in this battle. For example, the forces of the Night King, we have three major factions, rankings, I guess. You've got the Night King himself, you've got the White Walkers, and you've got the Whites. And we didn't see anything of the White Walkers apart from the White Walkers following the Night King into the Weirwood, where to the Godswood, where Bran is waiting for them. We saw nothing of them. we could have had a whole piece within this episode where the heroes get a minor victory, and are able to defeat one of the White Walkers. I mean, we kind of played that part already last season, but we could have possibly learned something from that victory that could have advanced us forward, that could have put us into a situation where the next time we went up against the Night King, we could be prepared for it. And it just didn't happen, and essentially what happens is building up 8 years, oh no, he's brought down the wall, everything's gone bad, he's turned up, oh no, it's fine. It was basically doing an infinity snap at the end of it all without the nice build-up of Infinity War to achieve it. No spoilers for Endgame, by the way. That was entirely a reference in situ for Infinity War, not Endgame. No spoilers for that. It's spoilers for Infinity War. Look, okay, so we've established that my predictions are bad and my predictions will not come true, and that's fine and dandy and groovy and great. But if I were to take up the story from here, from where we are actually left at the end of episode 3, I would reframe or reveal a reframing of the end of episode 3 at the start of episode 4. Because I think we still want to know more about the Night King, about what the Night King's role in the world is, about what they wanted, about his obsession with drawing spirals. I think all of that I want to know more about all of that. And I think one way that you could, and I really don't think they are going to, but this is, my preferred episode 4, would be to reveal that Bran not only set up the defeat of this Night King, but actually the replacement of this Night King. That there is something about the Night King and his part in the world that needed to continue. But this Night King, the Night King that was leading this army, had overstepped himself and had to be put down, had to be taken down, but his primary role in the Westeros universe still had to be fulfilled. And the reason why I think this is even remotely possible, I mean, it isn't, don't get me wrong, this is not going to happen, but the only reason which I think is remotely possible that this might be the case is what struck me about the similarities, very peripheral, but there, between the creation of the Night King as we have seen it and the death of the Night King as we've seen it. Because both the creation and the death of the Night King took place next to a weirwood tree, in a godswood, essentially. And it took place by a shard of crystal or ice, maybe, being plunged into the flesh of a living human being. And I think we also, this is maybe me misremembering, so you don't, but I think we actually saw a pan out, when we saw the Night King's creation, we saw a pan out, and that we saw in the godswood the spiral pattern that we've seen so many times associated with the Night King since then. And I think it would be really interesting that if we got an overhead shot in the daylight of the godswood post the Battle of Winterfell and revealed that those 10 soldiers that had been put to guard Bran had been killing whites, and that the whites had fallen in a spiral pattern. Okay. And that we had these two things, the spiral and the weirwood tree, being in situ as being echoes, parallels of the creation of the Night King. So what about shards of ice being plunged into a living human being? Well, I would suggest that Arya would have had at least a few cuts and abrasions from being at detonation 0 of the Night King, and that she is going to be scratched to heck with shards of ice, some of which will have entered her system. And I predict in the way that I predict things that don't happen. But my prediction is one thing that will not happen is it will be revealed that Bran put this whole plan together not to defeat the Night King, but to replace the Night King with Arya. And Arya is going to be the new representative of the force of death, essentially, in Westeros, completing her arc and resulting in also more information about the Night King and more information about Bran and his abilities. I think that would be horrific and horrible and a terrible, terrible loss of Arya. But I think it would be a really interesting surprise. It would be a really interesting twist, and I would love it. That is not what's going to happen in episode 4. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to see more about my wrong Game of Thrones predictions, check my episode 3 there if you've not seen it. If you want to see more about me as a writer, check the box there. Cheers.